In this video, we're going to look at the Task 1 form which you need to complete for your Level 1 Ascentis writing exam. So in Task 1, you need to be able to complete a form. In order to pass the task, you need to meet the following exam criterion. 3.1, complete a form with open and closed responses correctly. You need to complete all parts of the form in order to pass the task. Section 1 must be completed correctly, including full names and addresses. Section 2 must be completed correctly. And Section 3 must contain at least 3 appropriate sentences. So before you begin, make sure you analyse and understand the task so that you know how to complete the form. Think about the following. Who made the form and why, or which organisation designed it? Who is the form for? Who would fill in a form like this? Let's look at a task and the first page of a form on the next slide and try to answer the questions. This is an example of an Ascentis Task 1 form. It's the first page. Begin by reading the instructions carefully. This form says, read the college feedback form and fill in the information below. The keywords are that it's a college feedback form. So when answering the question, who or which organisation made the form and why, it said it was a college feedback form, so probably a college has made the form because they would like feedback. Who is the form for? Well, students go to college, so I imagine that the form is for people who study at the college. Who would fill in a form like this? Well, probably it would be a student of the college. First, let's look at how to complete section 1 of the form. So to complete this section, you need to know how to write names and addresses properly and how to write other personal details. If you don't complete this section clearly and correctly, you can't pass the exam. So first of all, make sure you use upper and lower case correctly, or use block capitals if this is stated on the form. Make sure you use upper and lower case consistently. So if you begin the form by using upper and lower case, continue the form that way. If you start this section by using capital letters, then you need to complete the whole section with capital letters. In section 1, you're required to give your title. Make sure you know your title. So for example, if you write in block capitals, you could write one of these titles. Mr. is used for men, Mrs. is used for married women, Miss is used by unmarried women, and Ms. is used by women who do not wish to state their marital status. If you use upper and lower case, you would write the titles this way. So begin with a capital letter and the rest of the title is in lower case. In section 1, you will also need to write your surname. Surname is your family name. Ensure that capital letters are clear and that your writing is legible. Make sure you write your name on the lines given. So for example, you could write your name with capital letters or upper and lower case like this. You will also need to write your forename. Forename is your first name or your given name. Ensure you write it on the lines given as before. So for example, you could write it in uppercase or upper and lower case like this. You may also need to write your date of birth. Date of birth is sometimes abbreviated or shortened to DOB. Make sure your numbers are clear and that you use this format. So put the day first, then the month, and then the year. For example, like this. You will usually be asked to write your address or your permanent address where you live. Make sure you use upper and lowercase correctly. If you write the address on one single line, make sure you use commas correctly. Use capital letters when you write postcodes. And remember, you do not need to use a full stop at the end of the address. So for example, if you write the whole address on one line, you will need to put a comma after each part of the address. So for example, put a comma after the road and a comma after the city, and then write the postcode in capital letters with no full stop at the end. Or you can write the address on different lines without commas. Remember to start a new line for each part of the address. So for example, you would put the road on one line, the city on another, and the postcode underneath like this. No commas, no full stops. You will often need to write your email address. Remember to use lowercase for email addresses. Make sure your writing is clear and legible. The @ symbol also needs to be clear. Include the dot where appropriate. So for example, the address may look something like this. You may also be asked to write your occupation and title, or the occupation and title of another person. Remember that occupation means job. So write what the job or the status of the person is. Begin with a capital letter. So for example, the occupational job could be doctor or GP, or it may be student. So for example, full-time student. Remember to use capital letters at the beginning of titles. So for example, the name may be Dr. Morgan. Remember the capital D at the beginning. Sometimes you may be required to state the relationship that you have with another person. So for example, if you are giving the name of a referee or you are asked to recommend another person, you need to be clear about the relationship that you have with that person. Read the exam question carefully so you understand what you need to write here. So for example, if you need a reference for a job, you would not ask a friend for that reference. Usually you would ask a current or a previous employer. So a suitable answer would be previous employer, not friend. Now let's look at section 2 of the form. You must complete this section clearly and accurately to pass the exam. Read the information on the following slides carefully so that you know how to fill in this part of the form. Sometimes you need to circle options. If you are asked to circle an option, draw a circle around it like this. If you put a tick or a cross next to it, or you underline the option, when they ask you to circle it, it will be marked wrong. So make sure you read the question really carefully. If you are asked to tick an option, use a tick next to the option like this. If there is a box, put a tick in the box like this. In the same way, if you are asked to use a cross for an option, use a cross, like this. If there's a box, put the cross in the box, like this. If you are asked to underline an option, draw a line under it, like this. Sometimes you are asked to delete options. Delete means take away or cross out. If you are asked to delete options, strike through the options which are not true for you, like this. The last part of the form is section 3. In section 3, you need to give fuller answers. Read all the questions in this section carefully and make sure you understand exactly what each question is asking you to do before you put pen to paper. Make sure you answer each question using full sentences. Answer each question with relevant information only. Read the questions carefully so you know which tense you need to use. If you use the wrong tense or the information is not relevant, you will not pass this section. Try not to repeat the same information when you answer each question. You need to write at least 3 correct, appropriate sentences in total in section 3 to pass this task. Therefore, if you need to write 3 correct sentences, I suggest you write about 6 sentences to make sure at least 3 of them are relevant and correct. Make sure you check your spelling, punctuation, and grammar carefully. And finally, when you have finished, check your work really carefully. As you check, ask yourself these questions. Have I answered all questions and completed all parts of the form? In section 1, have I used upper and lower case correctly? Have I used commas correctly in addresses? Have I written the date, email address and title accurately? In section 2, have I used circle, ticks and crosses correctly? Have I underlined or deleted information appropriately? And in section 3, have I understood the questions and given appropriate information? Have I written at least 3 correct, relevant sentences? Have I used the correct tense? And finally, have I understood the purpose of this form and do my answers make sense? So hopefully if you follow these tips, you'll be successful. Good luck in your writing exam.